Okay, this is Rick Lindsey. We're here for the I Hate Insurance podcast. We have a fine insurance agent here, Craig from Insure You Too from New York City. We've met, 6 months ago or so. Invited him out. We had a good snowmobile day yesterday. Snowing and cold, but it was adventurous. So tell us a little bit about you, your agency.
Yeah, so I'm Craig with Insure You Too. I love what I do. I love the insurance industry, and I think that there's a lot of amazing changes that really can occur, and it's time to revolutionize the insurance industry. I'm also an independent agent in New York. I'm 25 years old. I started in the industry when I was 18, and coming from a background of insurance with my mom being in insurance, then being diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, where she had to take a step back, where that allowed me to take a step forward and try to fill shoes that were way bigger than I can ever handle, especially the size that my mom was able to grow the agency, but doing the best that I can and really taking the agency to the next level.
That's why we're here today. When we met, he looked me up. We met in New York City and invited him out, and we, discussed maybe ways to look at it, raising the bar and doing it right. And so I think we both see eye to eye on, there's a better way to do it. So anyway, today's an interesting day. I voted, but I've never been to a caucus where you go to these neighborhood meetings and you select somebody to represent your neighborhood, and they actually vote for, the people who will be on the ballot where we all vote. So this is the opportunity. You just show up, make a difference, right?
I think you stand really well for that, even to make a difference. Like when it comes to handling insurance, Prime is completely different than any other insurance company out there. From the claim handling, the rating, the servicing standpoint, and it's I think that correlates with making a difference of what we can even do inside the insurance industry, of making a difference and trying to have other companies follow suit and do everything the right way, opposed to cutting corners, paying out on things or claims that shouldn't necessarily be paid out on, underrating certain risks.
I don't think insurance companies intentionally do it. I used to say I hate plaintiffs' lawyers, right? And now, I don't like lawyers who bring frivolous cases, but, when people are injured and, like tobacco, or they hid the ball, you find it. That's what lawyers should take, is good cases, right? They should do their job. And when I got in the business was the beginning of the litigation growth machine, right? And so I think it's evolved over time. The old insurance companies, it was a different world in the 50s and 60s, right? It was, and as it has evolved forward, the two don't really serve the client, right? And to me, it's like so simple. It's like, let's just make better decisions. So if, you're in the insurance business, you're a salesman, an agent, insurance company, actuary, whatever, you're buying the same crappy insurance everybody's buying, right? You're with American Family, or you're with AIG, but the goal of those policies has been to be cheaper. So buyers have always bought cheaper. So, it's like buying a Porsche. Do you buy cheaper Porsche? No. So most people want a quality Porsche. They want to feel like they're getting value. So, insurance has evolved to this low bar, right? So the customer experience, for me, I'm a consumer. So, when and if I have a claim, my desire is to have an insurance company who helps me through the process, right? They show up, they know they have a plan, or we agree a plan, because time is money, and we get the thing fixed, right? That, to me, actually requires underwriting from a claims perspective, right? So if you run a trucking company and your claims are out of control, right? And I say, so what's going on, right? Some of them are your fault, you paid them, we might be able to do better on those, but the ones that aren't your fault, what do you want, right? Do you want to fight frivolous litigation, or do you want to expand upon it, make it more traumatic and more, and then at the end of it, it's like a bad divorce. We cancel you, we hate each other, and you go find new insurance.
Yeah.
And it happens in earthquakes and storms in California, wildfires, Florida, same thing. Anytime the system is tested, it's failed. Now, my personal experience with insurance is the same. I pay for it, and I do it. Whether it's Jake with State Farm who insured my boat, or insurance companies who insure my insurance company, they really don't underwrite. They rate. And they craft coverage to try and eliminate a large portion of the risk to them, and you bear more risk. So when people's insurance goes up, they're sold captives, right? So let's think about this. If you were a billionaire and you said, look, I'm just going to put $100 million in an account, and it's going to be my own little insurance company. I'm going to pay my claims, right? So you wouldn't exclude anything.
Yeah.
If a flood came, you'd take the money out of there and you'd fix your flood-damaged buildings. If somebody sued you for assault and battery, you'd defend it. And, you would move forward. If you're a crook and you're doing all that stuff, then you're going to, run out of money and you won't be in business long either. So the key is good, successful businesses need to have a proactive approach where, if you take somebody's money, you actually mock a claim. Okay, let's say it's a wildfire, right? And you want a $3 million deductible. Do you have $3 million? If you don't, we really don't want to give you a $3 million deductible, right? We have to have a plan that we can execute. If you underinsure, which I would say is one of the biggest problems on most stuff. Now, I do see occasional locations where they've overinsured, right?
Yeah.
And then, again, you talk to the insured, you underwrite it, and they say, well, we have Italian marble, and we had, hand-painted ceilings, and, that's what it would be. And I would say, okay, I agree with you. Let's insure it for that. Because at the time of a claim, you have to have agreed all of this. You have to have, kind of mocked out a claim, and that's how you make a happy customer. Now, as an insurance company, if you screw up and you don't do your job underwriting, say you should have insured for $500 a square foot and you did it for $250, you can do that calculation, but in the process, you're going to make a very unhappy customer because it's not going the way that they thought it would. And isn't that our fiduciary responsibility as insurance professionals to make sure that people insure to the proper value so that when the claim occurs, we actually can execute? Now, if you realize, oh my God, we did this wrong, shouldn't you take the hit there and just pay the claim on a first-party homeowner's claim? Because you screwed up or your agent screwed up. And if you try that, lawyers, as they've proven in Florida, are going to come after us as an industry. They're going to sue the insurance companies, and they're going to sue the agents because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So, as insurance companies, as an industry, we need to raise the bar, right? We need to recognize that these linebackers, these plaintiffs' lawyers are like linebackers, and they're blitzing, and they're getting us every time.
Yeah.
So, there's a counter move to that. Raise the bar, tell everybody, look, insurance has been, what you've been paying has been too cheap. But the cost, right, after a claim, you hiring a lawyer, suing and doing all that costs you more money in the long run too. So, you're paying more than you think you are in the premium because you've got a deductible and co-insurance. All of the turmoil and pain and suffering and mental anguish you go through during a 3-year period after a storm in Florida. I mean, there's people who retired down there who are now leaving the state. They don't want to deal with storms.
Yeah.
That's like moving to Utah and not wanting to deal with snow, right? They probably should have thought of that before, and they should have had a plan. They should have bought good insurance. So, again, to me, I think, again, everybody's on a budget. Everybody has a problem, right? So you go buy a new car. You go, get all the stuff that you feel like you need to as you're, growing up like I did. I couldn't afford the stuff I had, and I didn't have an education. So, I was worried that survival, and, you have to be able to pay your bills, but people will buy nice watches and they'll do stuff instead of buying proper insurance. They want cheap insurance, and then I see guys, walking around with $30,000 watches, and it's like, dude, for another $2,000, you could actually have real insurance, right? But you want cheap insurance. So, priorities, making good decisions. To me, it reminds me of, a kid coming home with a Ferrari he can't afford. And as a dad, you're like, dude, they let you out with that? Yeah, they said I could afford it. And I'm like, well, they don't know you like I do, right? And did you check into the insurance? Because I'm not sure you can afford the insurance alone, let alone the car.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, when you're a dad, you're not people's friends. And as an employer and insurance person, you have a duty to them, right? You're their dad, you're their fiduciary. You advise them what's best for them, not what's best and cheapest, right? If somebody wants the cheapest, I tell them where to go. Be like walking into a car dealership, a Ferrari car dealership, and you can't buy, right? You're not a smart buyer. You don't have the money. There's no reason to waste your time on people who are looking for the wrong product. And so as insurance agents and brokers, I think we need to raise the bar, tell people, look, if you want to go with Citizens in Florida, they're the cheapest.
Yeah.
That's where you should go. Louisiana has the Citizens too. But when you have a claim, you're going to be applying for a government grant. And everybody in Florida who didn't have insurance, they can get low interest loans and all kinds of government assistance. It's just painful, slow process. So that again is value. Time is money. And so you would prefer to buy cheap insurance and then go apply for grants and struggle through all that. That's a decision you make, right? Okay, I'm not telling you, just like if you want to pay a frivolous lawsuit, okay, right? I just want to know going into it what our goals are, right? My goals as a consumer is I want an insurance company who sticks with me through thick and thin, right? Gives me everything I need, doesn't try and use fine print and exclusions to get rid of risk like flood and wind, assault and battery, your dog, any motorized equipment, all the stuff that as we live today, where does your business and your personal life stop and end, right? I think that's the biggest thing people don't recognize is the lines are blurred now.
Yeah.
Right? My personal life is entwined with my business life. Stuff we do personally together, it's also business related, right?
Absolutely.
So, there isn't a homeowner's policy excludes any business activities, and your business policy excludes any personal activities. So, where does one start? That's a gray area. That's where a linebacker comes in and shoots the gaps again. And we need to evolve in the way that phones have evolved, right? You used to have a phone on the wall with a long cord, right? You could go so far, and moms bought longer cords so they could go further. The cell phone has changed the world and life to a point where it's ridiculous that it hasn't changed insurance, right? And insurance to me, again, as a consumer, I want somebody to really underwrite me, right? Oh, I got a motocross track at my ranch. We have a shooting range. If you tell most underwriters that, they're going to put an exclusion on there, they're not going to write you, right? So most people lie to get the cheapest insurance. All right, so I personally had a guy trying to sell me life insurance for to pay my taxes when I die, and my first answer was, well, when I'm dead, I really don't care. That's my kids' problem, and I wish I had that problem, right? That'd be a pretty good problem to have. So I smoke cigars, and the salesman says, you know, you need to stop smoking cigars for 30 days so that you can get a cheaper rate. And I'm sitting there thinking, you don't know me very well, do you? Because I don't do that shit.
Yeah.
Right? Why would I do something that can be argued as being dishonest, right, to get a benefit and create a gap where I know that they're going to create an issue. When I die, that policy's probably not going to pay because they would say, that was our non-smoker rate. And obviously this guy has smoked for a long time, right? So, you know, I don't understand that whole, it's, you know, you're trying to sell somebody something, you know, in a way that makes it questionable. And, you know, that's just a bad decision. So I would never do that. You know, I would just pay the higher rate because I wouldn't want to buy the insurance and then worry about whether it's going to cover it or not. Of course, I'd be dead, so it wouldn't matter. But, you know, anyway,
it's raising that bar for the insurance professional. Like, even from an insurance professional standpoint, there's a line of ethics, I think, that goes into it as well, where when you have an agent that says, oh, well, I just need you to stop smoking for 30 days, it's like, but do you understand the claim process if you're even advising something like that? Right. Are you doing your correct underwriting to protect the company that's allowing you to place business with them? And that's the bar that I think that should be raised tremendously, because when you have agents that are going to do right by the company as well as the client, you're going to have a good relationship. This business is purely relationship built.
Well, and it made me feel uncomfortable. And the way he should have presented it is, look, here's one quote that is for a smoker. That's your rate. That's what you pay. If you quit smoking for 30 days and beyond, forever, this company will write you.
Yeah.
Because you stopped, right? But it's clear. There's not a gray area there where, you know, again, lawyers have been making millions of dollars before I was born. But my first experience was Katrina. And it's the wind versus flood, right? What was it? What was the damage caused by wind or flood? And by providing a common sense solution, one policy that covers both, you eliminate millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of arguments that can go to pay claims. So, I mean, doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But when you're trying to figure out how to be cheaper than the other guy, you're actually taking things away and making it, you know, less of a customer experience that I want to live through, right? Give me a customer experience that I want to live through, and that would be good insurance. And, you know, again, looking for the government to solve our problems is something that, you know, I pushed and supported for private flood insurance, right? Prior to 3 or 4 years ago, you had to have FEMA flood, the primary flood, and then I could provide excess flood. And, you know, so now I can provide flood ground up. I don't have to sell FEMA. Most companies like ours plug into FEMA, right? And we can issue their paper, and then we get paid for managing their claim.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which, again, that's double processing. Right? Why do you want a flood adjuster and a homeowner's adjuster going out and wasting each other's time when you could send out one person? And, you know, I'm not sure I like the word adjuster because they're being sent out there to re-underwrite the policy and do the mock claim and say, oh, they're underinsured. Here's their deductible. We don't cover flood. You don't have to pay the whole claim, which is what, you know, the homeowner is expecting to get paid to fix their house, maybe less their deductible. But, you know, again, I'm not sure most people have their deductibles. I think deductibles aren't offered in a way that they care whether you can pay it or not, which to me is another clue that, you know, that's maybe not the right way to do it. Let's make sure people can pay their portion of the claim. And in my policies, we have the ability to loan them the money if they actually can't come up with it at the time, because the goal of your insurance company should be to repair the house and make the experience less painful. Any claims are going to be painful, but your partners shouldn't make it worse on you or make it, more traumatic. So show up, have a plan already that now you understand we're going to execute. If it's a roof claim, they had a roofer, we have a roofer, doesn't matter, we need to find a roofer, sign him up and get the roof fixed. And, in Florida, you look around, there's tons and tons of houses down there with blue tarps on their roof still. So nobody really thought about how they were going to manage the claims. They think they're hoping that they're never going to have that bad event.
Yeah.
And if you never have a claim, then you can buy cheap insurance and you should be able to sleep well at night because you're never going to have a claim.
Yeah.
But, we don't know. California and Utah here, we have, lots of earthquakes every day. And growing up here, we did earthquake drills at school. Mm-hmm. And so, as a kid, the boogeyman, earthquakes, I'm sure kids in tornado country, I'm not sure anybody's worried about hail too much. It damages roofs, but I don't think people think they're going to get killed by hail. Yeah. But I'm sure it's happened.
Oh, for sure.
Anyway, I think as an industry, we need to really, technology, has changed everything. So, again, thinking about everything differently, it's not technology that's going to do it, right? A lot of people in our industry think it is technology, artificial intelligence. And I remember when it came out with cars, they're like, oh, that's the best thing, all this technology. Well, it makes it way more expensive to repair. It doesn't, prevent crashes and stuff. In a lot of cases, it adds to it. Right? Mm-hmm. My car I turn off the lane control the first couple of times I was in it. I thought the car was crashing and it's like jerking the wheel out of my hand and stuff. So now those are things that as you drive, you get comfortable with each car. But, there's just some of it that increases litigation and problems. It's not going to decrease it. So I like human intelligence. I'm more about personal relationships with producers and insureds, because when you're under pressure, it's like the playground, right? When you were kids on the playground, you know what kids would run in a fight and you knew what kids would stand and fight with you, right? Now in the business world, you have no clue, right? We do business with people and they talk and they promise. Then when the chips are down and the pressure's on, that's when you learn how people actually respond under pressure. And that literally is the only time that matters, right? Everybody can be nice to each other when, life's all, daisies and roses. But, on the playground and in sports, not everybody's a winner, right? Not everybody deserves a trophy. Nope. You can't treat everybody the same. You have to, if you do treat everybody the same, then the best people have to subsidize the worst people who don't pay attention. And to me, that's either communism or getting there, right? We're supposed to be here to be free and be able to have free enterprise work for us and have government stay out of the way. And like I told, people in Washington, I said, when an insurance company says we can't cover flood, we can't cover terrorism, my question would be, well, why not? Right? Yeah. The reason that they do that is because, like, terrorism, right? The guy who owns the World Trade Center or the Hancock Tower, the big buildings that are actually targets, they're the ones who say they can't afford it, right? I think they can actually afford it.
Yeah.
They just don't want to pay their proper price. They want it to be spread throughout the government. So as an insurance industry, if you take somebody's homeowner's premium or you take somebody's premium, on a large building that is a terrorist target, that should be included in your price. right? Because ultimately the building's burned down. Ultimately, like in an earthquake, does the building burn down, and does the fire insurance cover it or not cover it?
Yeah.
Depends what happens first, and it also depends on the policy. So you actually have to read the policy, and that's where this idea of running a mock claim. Let's say an earthquake happens, and then the fire starts. What does the wording dictate will be paid and not paid? And then the counter. And, again, I think that people who have the money should be able to reject that coverage. But then you say to them, okay, so you don't want flood, and we verified you can pay your flood claim, so I've given you a quote for everything. You're going to take the flood 100%. So, now you're opting out of that. And that's a way that we can actually enforce our contract when lawyers attack us as an industry because we don't offer them the proper coverage, or we don't offer them wind or flood or earthquake. And then when the earthquake happens, most people are going to say, well, I'm sure I had earthquake. I told my agent I wanted earthquake. And, agents don't think of that, but you're going to have to enforce it. Your file is going to become, part of the litigation as to, did you actually offer it to them? Well, no, we don't offer it to them. Nobody offers it to them. It's a separate policy. Well, when they think they had it, I remember back in the day, like captive agents like State Farm. It's a State Farm agent. And when he says something, that's like the company saying it. So that's why, it evolved to outside agents, independent agents that have their own E&O. So when you tell people stuff, you're not the company agent, you're the client's agent. So obviously, all of that gets dissected after the claim because nobody understood it right. Mm-hmm. And with this mock claims approach, you should be able to agree what a claim looks like. You're going to pay your own flood. Okay, again, I can customize it in any way, but we actually have to have a good understanding so that your expectations can be met, my expectations can be met, and we make the claim less painful, not more painful. So as a customer, I know what I want. I've lived through it. I've managed, hundreds of thousands of claims. And, liability, frivolous lawsuits is different than first party. It's a whole different relationship. Taking care of your first party claimants, homeowners, property, that's real underwriting. If their roof's 20 years old, when you take their money, you know that. Yeah. And you're going to say, so, you want us to replace your roof, or are you going to replace your roof? Oh, no, I'm replacing it this year. Okay. So, you give you 6 months to replace it. And if not, you got to pay a surcharge premium, because if it burns down, or a hailstorm comes, the hail is going to damage a worn out roof where a new roof wouldn't be damaged.
Yeah. Or even changing the loss settlement to actual cash value, opposed to keeping it replacement cost, where it's like, listen, like that's where working with the client saying, hey, how about you take on some of the risk, and we can design the policy that way. And it's creating options, kind of what you said before, is provide multiple options and let the consumer decide, opposed to just electing to say, hey, this is what you need, this is what you should have, because there is E&O exposure. And to kind of tie it all in, is I look at it where it's like when you see overweight police officers, where police officers have to go through a physical test to get the position that they're looking for. Now, after the fact, then they start to go down in whichever direction that they want. They start to become a little bit overweight. Then it gets to a point where they can't even get to the same numbers that they did to get to that test. Are they still that good fit to protect you? Right. Same thing from an insurance standpoint. If you're not doing your continuing ed, or you're not constantly researching, and you're just taking the information that you once consumed from getting licensed and not looking at the bigger picture, you're not going to understand it, and you're not going to be able to actually assist the clients to say, hey, let's look at this from a risk management standpoint, opposed to selling a policy.
Right. Well, and I think, again, captive agents, Allstate, whatever, they can't, maybe Allstate can now go outside of Allstate if Allstate declines it, but
Yeah.
there are other markets who you can't. So, as you know, as an agent for that company, if they don't offer what you need, you don't have an option for your client.
Yeah.
You just, I guess, you tell them you don't need that.
Yeah.
You know, so I think, you know, again, you know, in the old days when it was 40s and 50s, most of them were captive agents, you know, like Farm Bureau, Travelers, and they quoted the local risks and they went head to head. Now it's a lot, you know, different, but they have blinders on and they only know what they know, right? They know what their company position is. Then maybe as they went out into the market and, you know, got a little bit broader view, but, you know, all of the potential possibilities that, you know, can be used to, you know, become more efficient, right? And that's, I guess, if you look back 50 years and you look at, you know, technology, processing, you know, everybody had to have people in their office, right? Yeah. So the insurance company had people in their office doing stuff. Then they would appoint agents or brokers or MGAs, and they would have people in their office doing stuff. Then you got the retail agent, and you know, with all of the technology, it's everybody's still creating their own little bucket, right? There's no efficiency there, and so, you know, I try and because I was an agent first, you know, I had to bill, and I became an MGA, then I became a claims manager, then I became Greenlight, premium finance company, and then I became the insurance company. So, you know, I'm lucky that I have one system, right? Nobody else has that I know of, because you buy, you know, an agency system, you buy an MGA system, and all these companies, you know, they have different systems. And to me, everybody's, you know, typing in the same information, doing the same work. We haven't become more efficient.
So when we're talking about like your processes here, which we did take a tour around the office, you have a gym inside inside your office, which I think it's awesome, because it's like, it's almost like making sure like even all the employees, the team members, and anyone that's a part of the business is kept intact as far as your health, your personal, the business. It's making everyone full to be able to work and optimize their workability. What was like the reasoning behind putting in a gym in the office?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, again, I have a lot of really awesome employees that aren't fit, right? They're not into that. But I think as, you know, foundation, you want to create opportunity for people. And if you have no education in insurance, I'll give you an opportunity, right? And any of this stuff can be learned, because I learned it. I didn't go to school. I just started working in it, and to me, that's the best way for me to learn. So people who have gone to school for anything, you know, if they want an opportunity, I want to give it to them, right? And so when you come to work here, if you don't have a gym and you want the opportunity to, you know, improve your health and do good things, you know, I want to give you the opportunity, and I want to support you. You want to be involved in the community, you know, volunteer for elections or at the homeless shelter, whatever. I want to give you the opportunities to do, you know, whatever you decide, right? People think I give them jobs. I have a lot of friends, you know, from high school and stuff. It's like, well, give me a job, you know, give me a job. I'm like, dude, I don't really have jobs. I have opportunity, right? So you need to propose to me, you know, an opportunity that's a win-win. I got 5,000 ideas, but I'm not going to go try and sell you and everybody else on one of my ideas, and I prefer you to have an idea. I want to come in and be an underwriter. Okay, right? You start at the bottom and you work your way up, and you know there's tons of people here that can help you, you know, learn, and it's about experience. You know, dealing with opportunities, working with a team to get a quote out, and you know, pretty much what we do is we tell every producer, get the insured on the phone, right? I hear a lot that, we say, we're going to be more expensive. And, I tell people, that's not accurate. We're a better value, right? So, let's educate people and let's make them more aware of, real math. I call it true math, call it true insurance, TRU, and keeping it real simple. Just, same thing I want. I want true insurance. You want true insurance. So, I got claims people that, lawyers had no experience that work in the claims department, people in underwriting, risk management. We hire a lot of people from some of the insurance schools, and they do risk management. But as you get into it, sometimes you want to change departments, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're good and you make an effort and you're a productive team member, I'll let you move anywhere. If you're a turd and you're a troublemaker, then no, I'm not moving you around.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We're not searching for a spot for you. We got opportunity, and that means we need, people who actually are focused on making themselves the most they can be and helping a team look good. And, good team members make everybody look better, and they look better themselves. And there's a tendency for people to kind of, dig in on relationships with people they don't like, and I deal with that a lot. And, again, I deal with everybody on an individual basis. You might tell me he's a piece of crap, and, I'll take that into my computer banks, but I'm going to deal with him on my own and determine on my own relationship with him. And some of the best people I've ever met, Philadelphia taxi cab guy that I didn't know. I met all the taxi cab guys in Philadelphia because I insured them all in like 2005, 2006, and I canceled them all. And it was on the front page of the newspaper there where Prime's Rick Lindsey shuts down taxi cabs in Philadelphia. And we went there, and the guy had stolen $1 million from us and started his own insurance company. So that's why we canceled them all. And he had issued him coverage with another market. So anyway, we went there and got the $1 million within 3 days, which was the fastest, I've ever seen anything done in the court system. But, there was pressure. These cabs are sitting on the side of the road. Nobody can get a cab. And the court took it, very seriously and ordered the guy to bring us the money. And he did. And we reinstated everybody. But, there was guys this guy dealt with, and I thought he was a good guy, ended up being a very bad guy. And another guy that everybody said was like him actually ended up being the totally opposite. I still insure him today, and we've been through, at least we've had hundreds of claims, but 3 or 4 really bad ones where we both did what we said we would do. We didn't throw each other under the bus, which again, I like calling it a bad divorce, right? Bad divorces, the lawyers get rich because you get this, unwillingness to negotiate or be reasonable. And, that can happen when an insured and an insurance company have a claim and the lawyers create the perfect situation. The insured sues the insurance company. That's a lawyer's gold mine. That's better than any divorce. Yeah. So, that's my goal, is to avoid that at all costs, because it's real simple. Pick good people. Yeah. Don't deal with, dirtbags. And if you end up in a situation dealing with a dirtbag trying to take advantage of you, make sure you have the evidence to defend yourself. And in Katrina, we had a lot of homeowners down there. We had 1,200 claims overnight. And I dealt with this older gentleman, Louis Langdonus, Beacon Insurance. And he had been through numerous hurricanes. So when you bought homeowners insurance from him and you didn't buy flood, he had a big stamp. And he made you come into his office And he tried to sell you flood. When you didn't, he would stamp no flood on your policy, his copy, your copy, give you your copy. And his son, who started working with him, didn't like that because a lot of people would walk out and not buy the insurance. And he thought they were losing business. And to me, you want to lose bad business. You can't afford to enter into those. And, you know, if you're young and naive, you walk into those traps because you don't see it coming. I'm sure that he learned that in prior hurricanes when you showed up. So, well, I had flood. So he said, well, how am I going to make this clear so that we eliminate this confusion? And he created this big red stamp. So, you know, after Katrina, his agency survived like it had other times. His son actually got mad at him, left, formed his own agency, and grew much bigger. But when the storms came, it wiped him out, and he had to claim bankruptcy, and his agency went under. So, you know, again, looking ahead of the ball, down the road, if you know, what happens if we win this? If, you know, this storm happens or somebody sues you, you know, we fight or we lose. Okay, what's the next step? And if you feed frivolous litigation, you know, you're going to be like everybody else and you're going to just, you know, create a bigger problem. The answer is when you're liable, we admit it and we pay. They shouldn't have to get a lawyer.
Yeah.
If there's, you know, some discussion, then we should, you know, not waste a lot of money. We should agree a fault based on our experts. You know, we don't have to go to a court, just kind of like a good divorce. You lay all your chips out on the table and this is the math and you get her done. Or, you know, you go and it's a frivolous lawsuit that, you know, the injuries in most cases will drive the litigation and the settlement trend because everybody's worried about the what if, and what you should be focused on is the here and now, the facts. And if you can't defend yourself when you're right, and the system is going to make you pay people that you shouldn't have to pay, then you don't have a business anyway.
Yeah.
Your business is over. And if you didn't have insurance, you'd do that on your own anyway. Right? You'd live in reality. But when people buy insurance, they expect unrealistic expectations, and you know, I don't believe there is underwriting anymore. These nice offices we have and the environment we try and create is so that, you know, new people coming in can learn the new way. And again, I don't think we're, you know, I think we're not like other insurance companies, right? They're doing it the old-fashioned way where they design programs and products, and then they launch them to a sales force. And they just go, you know, there's no customization. It's like a can of corn or a one-size-fits-all. You might, you know, have an endorsement for liquor or hired a non-owned auto, but in most cases, they don't even want that anymore. We end up writing standalone hired auto and non-owned auto and liquor liability on a standalone basis, including sexual abuse and molestation, you know, assault and battery, active shooter, all that stuff sold separately, which to me, if you own a bar, a restaurant, or a security guard company, those are the things that are going to happen to you, right? And so, you know, not having that coverage to me or buying it separately is going to repeat the experience of the wind versus flood argument, right? You're going to be arguing over which policy covers it. And, you know, if there's an active shooter event or an assault and battery, the fact that they scoped the joint out, they probably went there weeks before, and you didn't prevent them from going in the school. So that's one event that the school liability policy is going to, if they're going to have to argue that there's coverage or not coverage. The actual shooting or the actual assault and battery at a bar, you know, that's not covered, but he's been there 100 times. He's a regular customer, and you saw this whole relationship developing. So I don't think monoline coverages works in the modern day world. You know, in the 50s and 60s, maybe. But, you know, as we were talking earlier, the crossover of business and personal, you really can't eliminate that. Assault and battery, sexual abuse and molestation, those are all crimes that individuals do, right? And that's not covered under any insurance policy. So you really don't need all of these exclusions and or separate policies, except, you know, it's the old-fashioned way of dealing with it. We don't cover that, so we can be cheaper. Well, you're cheaper, but when you have a claim in that situation, it's going to cost you a lot more money because your policies aren't working together.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's what we've created here with the office. And, you know, I don't know, I could probably look, but I have, you know, at least 20% of my staff, if not more, that's been here more than 10 years. And, you know, I think as an employer, I want to give them the best health insurance, the best resources, the best support. You know, I've had employees that have had cancer, and, you know, we support them. They don't even take time off. We don't, you know, try and make it more difficult for them during their time of trouble. We want to make it easier for them. And from what, you know, they get healthy and come back. Obviously, eventually, all of us die. But a good employer needs good employees, and vice versa. Right? I would never discriminate against anybody, either in an employment situation or in an insurance situation. I need good partners, right? Whether you're a Martian from the moon or, you know, I don't care what ethnicity, from where. We do a lot of Russian truck drivers and, you know, ethnic people who are immigrating legally to the U.S., and, you know, they're great people, but they kind of feel uncomfortable because they don't have good partners. They don't have a good insurance agent, a good insurance company that, you know, gives them that confidence. When they get in an accident, they get all nervous. I'm like, dude, Mel, simmer down. It's not even your fault, right? We got you. I'm going to get canceled. No, you're not. That's why you buy good insurance, is so you can stand tall and know that your partners on the playground are going to stand tall with you. So hopefully we can revolutionize the insurance world.
Yeah, and I mean that's the true mission here, and it's just getting the consumer to understand. Like, even on our way here, we heard an online commercial from an insurance company, and it's like, reach out to us, bundle your home and auto, save 25%.
Right.
How do you save 25% with the same exact coverage that's supposed to be on your home? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And then it's like when you keep listening to the commercial and it's the fine print that they say really quickly, that by that point you're already tuned out and you're thinking of that 25%. That's what we're looking to do, is to really revolutionize the insurance industry, revolutionize the insurance buying process, the claim process, which you already have down packed.
But
And
if you have a room full of people, right, and you don't know who are these, you should just say, look, everybody that wants cheap insurance, go to this side of the room. If you want a professional to review, your plan and get you, a strategy in place that, is going to work for you when and if you need it, go over here. The majority of the people would go for price, but that's fine with me, right? If 10% of the people want to do it right, that's the 10% we should be focused on.
Yeah.
We should, and we're happy to educate any of these people, and I think there's a huge portion of the people that, as they have life's experiences, they'll think of more value, right? And so, I talk about value, and, as an underwriter, you don't really get to use your own judgment, right? They give you set rates, columns, and an up or down. You can credit or surcharge 10% either way, but, they really boxing you in. And, when you look at pawn shops, right, or like this TV show Pawn Stars, where, they bring stuff in, they see stuff, and you think they're like, criminals in there, taking stolen watches and stuff, and when people bring stuff in, they're not trying to rip them off or take advantage of them. The guy says, this is, Tonto's sword, used in this fight. And they're like, oh, that'd be really cool. How much you think it's worth? Well, I've researched it, and they give an opinion. They don't know. So they say, well, I got a guy, the local historian here, so he can give us more info than I have. And they do it right in front of them. They don't hide it from them. It's all transparent out on the table, kind of like a mock claim.
Yeah.
Let's lay down how your current policy would work compared to a better policy, a better strategy. And you just, that's what people should want. But in life today, again, when you want the Ferrari, and you probably know you can't afford it, then you just want cheap insurance so you can still have your Ferrari.
Yeah.
And, so again, I do think people who want cheap insurance, I was that guy, right? When I bought a car, I wanted the cheapest, right? So, but I couldn't afford the car or the insurance. But at some point when you grow up and you get married and you have kids, I think there's an opportunity there, if there is nobody different like us giving you the option to have a true partner, that the test is when the worst happens, do they help you through the claim, make it easier, and then they keep insuring you. When they go bankrupt, or like in California where they exit the state and they say we can't do it anymore, that's not a partner.
Yeah.
That's somebody who either got it really wrong, didn't know what they were doing, or they knew what they were doing and they want to get the hell out before they have to pay, claims that they would have to pay. So, or get involved in litigation. And, in California now, it's been property, wildfire. Well, the last 6 months I've seen these new maps where they now are saying that, litigation in these neighborhoods and these areas is exploding. So, and again, that's another reason for them to, cancel and get out and just exit the marketplace when, California is the biggest market probably in the country. And, all these companies have been the experts, they're the big guys. They've been doing all this for years. And the fact that they can just walk away from it and, it's too much risk. Well, I thought you were an insurance company. I thought that's what you did was take risks. So if you price it properly and you underwrite it properly, why would you run away? Why would you leave the playing field? Right? It doesn't make sense to me. So anyway, there's, obviously, I think right now, everybody's insurance is going up everywhere, right? In 1985, when I was getting into the business, there was an insurance crisis. It was the headlines in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, insurance crisis, daycare centers can't get coverage, businesses shutting down. And, since then, I've written businesses who would tell you, if Rick didn't insure me, I'd have been out of business. Right? He was the only option. Whether it was, taxi cabs in Philadelphia or truckers, helicopter ski guides, roofing contractors, people who, had a claim and now they're uninsurable. Because you have a claim doesn't mean you're uninsurable. Some of my best insureds for 30 years had a claim after 30 years and they were still my best insured. And we managed the claim together successfully, and I still insure them today. And I didn't have to change their rate. I did have one here locally that had an unfortunate death. And again, we've handled, many of these similar avalanche death cases. And he wanted to settle it, so we settled it. We paid $1 million. I've never paid $1 million on an avalanche death case, but that's what the insured wanted to do, and I'm not going to argue with my insured. So at renewal, his price went up.
Yeah.
And, at the time I told him, I wouldn't have paid what you told me to pay. He's a lawyer in San Francisco, owns a backcountry ski operation here. And again, I'm confident that I could have got rid of it For less than that, because of liability, there was no liability. You know, it was a doctor. He made money. And so the lawyer was scared, and he told me I didn't know what I was doing and that I'd never settled a claim like that before for less than that. And so, you know, okay. You know, I'm not going to argue with my own insureds, and I've insured him for 35 years. But, you know, again, until you get in those pressure-packed situations with people, that's when you're going to learn what they really do. So now I know he wants to pay people that, you know, you don't have to pay. That's called life insurance or health insurance. That's not liability insurance. So he wants to play the game in a different way, which requires more premium. It's just math.
Absolutely. Wouldn't you want to protect your money-making machine as far as like a business? If you have a business that is producing you income to support you, your family, and all that, those, wouldn't you want the right insurance so that way if anything were to happen, you're going to be covered? And it's that ease of doing business. And granted, you want to always kind of pay attention to minimizing claims or whatever the case may be from an exposure standpoint, but purchase the right coverage so that way if anything were to happen inside your exposure, it's not going to damage the machine that makes you money. And that's one thing that I believe in.
Anyway, again, it's all about people. And, you know, in the old days, I think the insurance and banks, they were like that. Like, hey, Bob, how you doing? You know, and you knew that it's like, you know, that rocket ship you're building out in your barn, you know. Now, he can lie to you. You don't know what's going on in his barn. And they hide stuff. And, you know, Bob Burnquist, who's kind of like Tony Hawk, he had the biggest skateboard ramp in the country in his backyard. And, you know, every time the homeowners company would find out, they would cancel him. But he would lie on the application because he knew if he said, yeah, I got the world's biggest skateboard ramp in my backyard, you know, it'd be like, yeah, we can't do that. So, again, I was the first guy who actually did his homeowners with the ramp. And, you know, we had rules. He outlined who would come over and what would the process be in training them and getting them a release form. And, you know, there's a way to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
But you have to be able to customize stuff, and insurance companies want volume cookie cutter. And that's why, you know, today, Gerber Baby Life Insurance, you know, 20 years ago, they sold that to grandparents to buy for their new baby. And it was $5.99 for $5,000. Well, now they're all selling that to seniors, 55 to 85, guaranteed issue, doesn't matter. And I watch that commercial every time, and I'm like, so how does that make a 55-year-old feel when the 85-year-old pays the same rate? That doesn't make sense, but people don't look at it like that because they're not in the insurance business. They look at it like, well, I'm in that range. I can get that guaranteed issue, no medical, no requirement. Well, that's because it's really, I guess if you want $5,000 in coverage for $9.99 a month, okay, but it's a turd.
Yeah.
There's no value there, you know, and they say, oh, bull, you know, there's people who buy that for a month and they get $5,000 to help pay for the funeral. Oh, okay. Well, it works out for a few, but I know enough about this. Overall, the insurance company is creaming it. Or they couldn't spend all that money on those TV ads. I mean, they're spending more than a law firm who, you know, gets billions of dollars in settlement. So I know that is your favorite product. You've taken the real risk out of it because the actuarial tables actually work, because the limit's so low and the premium's so high. It's just math.
Yeah.
So, you know, in our world, it's about the variables, right? If you have a claim that you're not at fault for, that you could pay $1 million on, and you pay $1 million every time, but, you know, we've paid $30,000. Which result would you like?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're involved in this math equation, but when you're not a partner, you know, when the actuarial tables don't work, the coverage goes away, which is what's happening with, you know, the stupid thing is in Florida, the new companies are coming in doing it the same way the old companies did that went bankrupt. And it's like, dude, this is just going to keep happening over and over again. Prime Insurance Company, which I own and operate, we do business with agents and brokers nationwide. We don't actually restrict anybody. Everybody historically has said, I'm stupid because I should pick, certain people. And, I think the better approach is to let the best surface to the top of the pond. And in dealing with, the way we want to do business, any agent or broker who brings business to us, we want to talk to the insured. Many agents and brokers don't like that. I think that it eliminates errors and omissions exposure, creates a tighter partnership with good people. I know when I was a young man and felt like people didn't understand me, whether it was a bank or an insurance company, they would decline me. I would say, well, can I talk to the underwriter or whoever's making, oh, no, you can't talk. He's like the Wizard of Oz hidden away. And, we should all just be in the same mindset of, let's form a partnership. And over time, people want you to trust them right out of the gate. And my favorite saying is, look, you can't give trust. Trust is earned. When you give trust to people too soon, you are almost setting yourself up for disappointment because different people are going to act differently, when the chips are down. And so, me as a company forcing 100 agents to go through one guy and they can't deal with me, they can't talk with me, that's not a good relationship. And the reverse of that, where, you as an agent or broker or professional don't want me talking to your client, that doesn't make sense to me because it creates gaps and more opportunity for disagreements, right? If we're going to go to the Super Bowl, be on the 1 yard line, and have the opportunity to win the Super Bowl, we got to all be on the same team, no miscommunication. It's a team effort, which means, can you run a virtual football team? No. We actually all have to show up to practice and know the play we're going to run. And then when we call the play, we all go run the play like we can win, like we can score. We don't sit around and say, my friend says we're going to lose this lawsuit. And, again, any lawsuit can be lost. That's why they have appellate courts, right? Most of the time, juries and the system gets it right. When it doesn't, they have appellate courts. One of my worst days was in Hawaii, Haleakala, downhill bicycle tours. Guy has a shirt on, says no guts, no glory. He passes the guide, which is a no-no. You're supposed to stay in single file line. He can't make the turn, hits the guardrail off into the rocks. And then he sues. And, the local people don't like the tourist businesses. So they think that if they award this injured guy money, they'll shut down the tourist businesses. So, there are situations where in the lower courts you don't get treated fairly. And so that's why they have appellate courts. Insurance companies refuse to appeal. You know why? Because you have to post a bond and it costs you more money. And that's really our job as your partner, is to spend more money, not try and save money. And, again, if you get arrested or you get accused of some criminal crime, do you want your insurance company to go negotiate the cheapest rate with the crappiest lawyer? And if you want the best lawyer, do you want to try and negotiate a price with them when it's your life or your reputation? No. It's like, pay the guy the money he wants. I want to win. So, again, that's what we try and do as an insurance company is, treat people the way you want to be treated. I'm an insurance consumer, so I know what I want. I know the regular insurance world doesn't offer an all-in-one homeowners policy with earthquake, flood, umbrella policies. They're not umbrellas anymore. They're excess. So if your homeowners excludes your dog, your umbrella is an excess policy, doesn't cover it. So we offer a true umbrella where we actually schedule everything that's excluded on your primary policies, your firearms, your dog, your business activities, your volunteer activities, all of that stuff's covered. So we want work, home, and play on your personal umbrella. That's real life today, with how everything's so complicated and intermingled. There really isn't the separation there was. You went to work for GE with your lunchbox. You walked into the GE factory, 5 o'clock, horn blew, you walked out. There was a real separation between work and home. There isn't anymore.
Yeah.
So, we're offering a new revolutionary approach to, I say we don't sell insurance, we form partnerships. And we want to help you use, the insurance market to your advantage.
And it's so important, especially like with us coming together, knowing to have a company like Prime Insurance to really back you up. Just reach out to a company like Prime that really can insure you too.
Yeah, we like that. We can insure you too.